All right, so we have saved it, we have posted it, we have finished with our first exercise. But there is an optional finishing technique that I want to show you, because the beauty and magic of digital art is that it can make perfect copies. So once you've done all the work to do the assignment the way I've required, where it's just black lines overlapped on each other. Here we go. I don't need all of these open. We'll get to it, right? The beauty is now I can play with that, right? I've made a unique thing. I can play with it. And so instead of being limited to just black pixels, I can replace those pixels with something more interesting. Maybe even something that relates to my theme. So first of all, remember when I saved my PNG and then I opened it in preview and there were little specks that weren't black, right? There's little artifacts, little edges of light gray around some of the lines, but not all of them. How can I take care of that? There might even be some color in there somewhere. How can I clean everything up? Make it as professional as possible, which you're not required to do for this exercise, but it will help me with finishing it off. The first thing I can do is what's called a non-destructive merge. There's two ways to do this. There's the longer way, which makes more sense, which is you select all your layers on top of your background. And if your background has an image on it, you'll have to unlock your background by renaming it, even though my background doesn't have an image on it, and unlocking it in order to be able to complete it. So everything except for your locked background, you hold down Shift and you select all those layers, whether it's 50 layers or 5 layers. Then, once they're selected, you're going to click on the folder icon that's at the base of the layer window. This is true in Photoshop and Photopea. What that does is it just makes an organizational folder group of all of your assets. Why is that helpful? Well, remember how we duplicate something and it's up on the board? What's the shortcut for it? Command J. Command J does not only work with selections or layers, it also works with whole layer groups. So if I do Command J, instantly, almost instantly, Photoshop it's instant, I get a copy of that same folder. Because digital is really good at making exact copies. Now with this copy in a way that's non-destructive to all these components that I built it out of, I can now right-click on that folder group and merge them. Merge those layers together. It's the same as flattening the image, but flattening the image while still having all of the component layers. So now in one layer, notice only one layer is on, I have everything. Not merge down, because that will merge all of your layers. Instead, once you have that group folder and you right-click, you're going to say merge the group. So you'll only get that option when you have a group. So if I do another layer here and I make them into a group, select multiple layers, make a folder of them, and then I right-click on the group, it will give me the option to merge the layers of the group. So Shift is what's called a column selection. So it's like bookends. So you have the top layers highlighted and selected. Hold down Shift and then click the bottom layer. And it will do the whole column. The other way is to hold down Command, and then you can click on each one, and it will add to it. It shouldn't disappear, but I'll show you. So here's my old folder. If I click on the top layer and I hold down Shift, no matter how many layers I go down, it will select everything between them as long as I'm holding down Shift. If I hold down Command, it will add and select multiple layers as I click them. So one's a selective multiple selection and one's a column multiple selection. But yeah, I can help you with that. We can practice it. Once you have them merged, now we can play with it. Here's the other way. I told you there was a way that makes more sense. This is the way that makes sense, right? The way I usually do it, which is a little bit faster and doesn't make as much sense, is if you go to your topmost layer, right? So pretend I didn't make this one, and pretend I didn't make a folder, and you hold down Option, and then you go to layer, forgetting in Photo Peak, you have to select them all, and you hold down Option, and then you go to layer, and then you say merge layers. But you have to hold down Option while you do this. Then it will not merge the layers. Instead, it will make a duplicate layer on top that is merged. So that's what that is. But to understand it, it makes sense to make a new group, make a group, duplicate the group, then merge that duplicate group. It's a non-destructive way to merge. Why do we need to merge? Well, remember how we used levels, the direct adjustment of levels to clarify our lines, right, to isolate them? I'm now going to do that here. So I'm going to go to Image Adjustment Levels, but this time it will do it to everything. Whoops. It will do it to everything, not just one layer. So you can see I have some non-black and white in my histogram. So how can I push that? I'm going to really push the whites, and I'm going to really push the blacks to really narrow it down. Okay, now I don't want any of those whites at all. So what I'm going to do is use my magic wand and have contiguous unchecked and just click within these newly cleared blacks, right? Like they're all really dark black now. And then I'm going to hit duplicate, Command J, and then delete the one underneath it. And now it strips it clean. So these are all just cleanly black pixels now. Why is that a good thing? Not only will it look good as black on white, now I can get a really good selection of the shape of those lines. And what do I want to replace the black with? Something else. I'm going to go to Google Images, and what's something that says Greek mythology to me? Let's say bird wings, like the Pegasus. So I want to find a texture of bird wings, and I want it to be large, without watermarks, right? Something visually interesting and maybe colorful. Maybe something like this. Maybe something like this. So I open those up in a new tab, and then I want to open the image in a new tab to make sure that there's no kind of hidden wrongness with this, that they really are over 1,000 pixels as they say they are. And what do I get? I get this one. That looks good. I'm going to move it to the desktop, and I'll organize it into my folder. And then where did the other one go? Open image in new tab. If you don't wait for it to actually load, and you say open image in new tab, but it takes you to the website instead, you can see this has a watermark on it, right? That's why you do it. It's still good for what I'm using it for, but you always want to check the full quality image. All right, now I'm going to take that and I'm going to drag it on just like it was line art. And then I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to stretch it like this is wrapping paper that I'm going to wrap my line art in. So it covers the line art. You can warp it, even though it's a smart object. This takes a lot more processing to warp a smart object, but it's possible, right, in newer versions. Okay, now that it's covered, I'm going to turn it off for a second, and I'm going to use my magic wand just like we have done before. And what am I going to do? I've just clarified all of these black pixels, right? So now if I use the magic wand on the black pixels, if I'm on the right layer, it's going to select all of them perfectly. Then I can turn off that selection, and I can see that the selection travels between layers. So I can now move that selection to this layer, this smart object. And if I want to fill in the black with this color and texture, all I have to do is Command J, duplicate it, and then turn off the background. So what that is all of my line art now filled with that color and texture. But that's kind of boring because it's all from one source. The reason I got two of them is now I can bring this in, do the same thing, hold down Shift, kind of stretch it so it covers. because compositing works with placement, right? But it also works with opacity. And it works with color blending. So now I'm going to take that same layer, do the same thing. I can do it on the black layer or this color layer. I'll just do it a slightly different way so you understand it's the same thing. This time, instead of selecting the black lines from this layer, right, I'm going to select the empty space from this layer, right, with contiguous, not selected for the magic wand. It will select everything, as long as I'm on the right layer. It will select everything except the pixels, right? But I want it to select all the pixels. So I say select inverse, swap it, right? So that's another way to select all the line art. And then I'm going to move that selection to this new file and then hit Command J and then delete the file underneath or turn it off. And now I have that color, but that's at 100% and this one's underneath it. But I can blend them together. So I can take that top layer and I can take its opacity down and merge them. I can also use blending modes like multiply to let everything come through. Or some of these other blending modes, like let's use the lighter color from those layers. Or some of my favorites are like pin light. And if I have the black and I did multiply, it would all be black, right? It just depends what the blending mode is. I can also use adjustments that we'll be learning later on these colors, but instead of just levels, I could use things like hue saturation, because both of those are kind of similar color palettes, but I could really push the hues of one layer or another. Get kind of these red feathers in there, and then really intensify them or de-intensify them. And all of this is so easy to do because we made the work of clarifying our black pixels. And now they're like a mask for other things we might want to do. So there are three levels, or there are three direct adjustments we're going to learn. Levels is the first, color balance is the next, and then hue saturation. Those three give you full control of light and color for every pixel. All right, but would I like it? I'm good, and then I'm going to save it. Now the beauty of this is this PSD now has these color options, but it also has my clean black lines, and it also has all of the independent layers that made it up, right? So this is a working file format that takes up a lot of memory, but allows me to generate lots of different versions of the project. So to make it like my last submission, I'm going to turn off the background, and I'm going to submit it, or save it again, export it as a PNG. Because if you want to do this extra, you're going to add it to the black one that you submitted. Okay, the problem is, and this is also why I show it with this first exercise, it went to downloads and it's saved as a PNG. But if I drag it now into this folder, it has the exact same name as my other PNG. And it will warn me, do I want to replace it? Do I want to keep both? Do I want to stop doing this? One way to do it is to say keep both, find it, and then rename it, right? So this PNG now, I'm going to say color at the end. And I'll mark that orange because that can go to Canvas. So I have a black PNG, I have a color PNG, and I have a PSD that I mark green, even though that goes away when I save it in Photopea. That reminds me that's my master file. When I want to work on it, that's where I start. Okay, now I can go back to my post, and I can edit it. Boom. And hit return, do it underneath. It's better to do a stack rather than side by side. And then I drag in this new PNG. It's marked orange. It's not the PSD file. And then I shrink it to fit. And that's the most you're going to be able to do with this project, right? And that's why you'll see in the past student work not only black and white examples, but also color examples. But you always have to do black and white first. And that's true of your design work as well. You never design a color logo without first doing a black shape logo. Because the black shape is the thing that gives you all the versatility. Okay. So I'm going to refresh here, and then we're